Jeremy Adams, Frank Terry, Stephanie Phillips, Matthew Rosenberg, and Delilah S. Dawson, along with an army of artists, dive into the war zone as the heroes of the DC Universe assemble to hold back the threat of Pariah's dark army. Jeremy Adams, Frank Terry, Stephanie Phillips, Matthew Rosenberg, and Delilah S. Dawson get into the middle of the Dark Crisis event with a 5-story anthology series covering various aspects of the war, with many stories actually furthering on plot points we've seen in both the Dark Crisis main book and other books like the Flash series. While none of the stories have huge stakes, not every story needs to, and I like that we got a more boots on the ground look at the battle, following Linda and Iris as they become heroes to a group of children, the Lanterns acting as the grunt soldiers to the hero and being the sort of frontline defense, and even the various groups of Amazonians coming together and being the hero's rescue corps for the injured. It was all quite cool and not something you usually see in story events like this, since they always have to have the tie-ins try and be some big effect on the main plot or have like some sort of integral part that you need to read. But I just like that it's just boots on the ground, heroes getting into it with villains and helping out the people where they can. Probably the biggest story of the bunch though is the return of Spectre and Jim Corrigan returning as the Spectre and being forced to return to his life as a spirit. However, Frank Terry doesn't do the usual story with Jim finding there's no other way to control the Spectre and he has to take him over again. In fact, we start the story with Jim knowing that he will need to join with the Spectre again and has accepted that that's what his life is. So I'm hoping we get to see a little bit more of him in some future book somewhere, whether he ties in with some other characters or something or gets like his own little mini-series or something. I'd be very interested to see a Jim Corrigan who is now back as Spectre and accepted that this is his life now and there's no other way for him to live. Fernando Passaron, Serge Acuna, Caitlin Yarsky, George Kambadias, and Tom Denerick help tell these war stories with a nice variance in art styles that, unlike the Dark Army one-shot from last week, all somewhat complement each other and aren't so distracting when compared to one another. Like the writing, I enjoyed the artists all got into the nitty-gritty of the ground battles and actually had sort of a set geography between the stories of where all these characters were, which is something that's really difficult to do in an event series. So I like that we got to see all the cool action from the ground and all the chaos, and it had a nice flow to it all. Dark Crisis Warzone Issue 1 was a fun set of stories that, while didn't push any grand narrative forward, provided us with some cool on-the-ground action of DC's biggest hero versus villain war. I'm going to give this issue an 8.5 out of 10. Dark Crisis Warzone Issue 1 finds Iris West caught in the middle of the hero versus villain war in the Hall of Justice, phoning in her report on the battle as it happens. She sees a monster trying to get some trapped children as she throws her phone at it, getting its attention away from them. Before it can smash her, Linda Park saves her with her speed powers, recognizing Iris, who also recognizes Linda despite her costume. Linda fills Iris in on how she got powers and what happened to Barry, but Iris knew he'll run off and save the world again. Linda knows he'll come back as another fight spills into the area, causing the women to grab the kids and move them out of the way. Iris and Linda shepherd the kids away from the violent battle and into the Hall of Justice, where Iris inputs her special codes, telling them this is how they could get out of the war zone alive, remembering how Barry told her about this special room and got her to memorize its code. Inside the room, the group find various weapons they can use to defend themselves. Armed to the teeth, Iris blasts Nocturna, saving Blue Beetle from certain death as they move through the battlefield, keeping the kids safe from Multiplex and Silver Banshee and Sinestro, all while trying out the various weapons they took from the armory. Eventually, the kids are given to some police officers nearby, and Iris thinks they did a good job and the boys would be proud. Linda thinks that she'll have to tell Barry about it when he gets back, but Iris doesn't know if he is coming back. Linda knows that she said it herself and Barry Allen might be late, but he's always on time as Barry and the rest of the Justice League return to Earth. Across town, Jim Corrigan speeds through the streets, angered that his first vacation in almost 20 years got messed up by the Spectre yet again, despite being free from him. Jim smashes his car directly into Frankenstein thanks to not watching where he's going, but Jim knows the monster is still alive, so he leaves the crash car, confronting the Spectre amongst the battle at the Hall of Justice. Raven holds back Spectre's power, attacking the being who directs her power back onto her, defeating Raven and causing her to shrink in size. Jim knows that since splitting from Spectre, the being hasn't been himself, himself, and he's meant to be the wrath of God, but what he's doing here isn't wrath, as he picks up Roy Harper, flinging him down at Raven. Raven manages to save her friend along with various other heroes the Spectre throws at her. Jim realizes that the Spectre is enjoying this vicious cruelty and torture, and maybe him being there can help ground the Spectre and return him to normal. Jim confronts the being, touching him and beginning the transformation back into the Spectre, but he finds it easier said than done, since whatever Pariah infected Spectre with is fighting against him and resisting the chain. Luckily, Raven helps out, using her dark power to restrain the Spectre and allow Jim Corrigan to once again become the Spectre and begin the fight between him and the Spectre once more. At the library of Themyscira, Cleo is brought more books by Medusa, adding to the immense pile she already has as she continues her documentation of the new cataclysmic events. She knows despite the island being hidden away from everyone else on Earth, they still have a duty to its people, and between Queen Nubia and Yara Flor, they are compelled to do what they can and more. Cleo finds they often concentrate their efforts on things that keep the darkness at bay, and they are warriors who are capable of drawing blood but also stopping the bleeding if necessary. Xena meanwhile asks Andromeda if she thinks that things will have deteriorated in man's world since they were last there, but the warrior knows that even if they have, it's their duty that they are needed. The women head through the portal and head to man's world and offer their help to the people, while the best of the Amazonians battle at the Hall of Justice with Nubia and Yara Flor and Wonder Woman. Xena and Andromeda lead a group of Amazonians into the area surrounding the Hall of Justice, helping find trapped people amongst the rubble, putting out fires and seeing to the wounded, as at Akahim, the warriors begin finding even more possessed inhabitants around their rainforest. Suddenly, Anahi has another vision, telling her people that she saw the absolute death and destruction coming for them at the hands of Deathstroke and his army of madness. Green Lanterns meanwhile press the attack on Pariah's Dark Army and Hal thinks that this is going to be a very good time. He directs Guy and Joe to go and buy them some time while they deal with Deathstroke, as Guy argues his position in the battle, seeing Superman taken down by Deathstroke's army, which makes Guy decide to follow Hal's orders and take the fight to the bad guys. Guy, Joe and a group of Lanterns battle the Shadow Army on the front line, desperately trying to hold the line against them, but they soon become overwhelmed. Joe wants to retreat, but Guy of course wants to stay and fight and stop the villains right there, telling the younger Lantern that he's been doing this a lot longer than she has, and they won't ever stop, and she's worried about losing some people if they stay. If they retreat, they'll lose everyone. Joe agrees with Guy, rallying the Lanterns to form a construct wall to keep the shadow demons at bay. One Lantern isn't sure they can hold them for long, but Joe knows that they can because they must. She tells the Lanterns that this is their line in the sand, and if the enemy cross it, it's up to them to make them regret it, since no one else is coming to help. She wants them to forget their family and loved ones and the people they swore to protect and what happens when they fail, since there is nothing to be afraid of, since there is nothing else but this moment. Guy is overrun by the shadows, but Joe saves him with a burst of lantern light and some shrikens, telling him to get back in line. The heroes, however, find the monsters are retreating, and Joe thinks that Guy was right to keep fighting. Guy doesn't want any of the credit, since it was her speech that lit the fire under the monsters today. Joe thinks that Guy, however, convinced her to hold the line, asking how he knew they could survive, but Guy knows he didn't, thinking that they were all going to die in this battle. Down in the battle, Robin, Power Girl, Red Canary, Dr. Light, and Sideways return from their trip in the multiverse, helping out in the battle. Robin doesn't think the girl will survive the battle long enough for him to remember her name, but Red Canary looks to prove him wrong, confronting a were-hyena monster. She battles the creature, but Robin saves her from the creature's deadly talons. Canary doesn't need his help, but Robin begs to differ, since without powers or experience, she is just a liability. He calls for Sideways to give them a portal out of there, but he is busy dealing with another monster, so Robin tells Canary to go and hide in the bombed out bus nearby so she doesn't get in the way, and upon seeing Superman defeated, Red Canary does so, watching the battle from the destroyed bus, hating that Robin is right. She begins to doubt if she ever had what it takes to be a hero, since it's way out of her league as the doll maker sneaks up behind her, but is taken down by Black Canary, who introduces herself to the woman as Dinah. Red Canary can't believe that she is actually meeting her hero, as she tells Dinah that they call her Red Canary, and Black Canary is her idol. Dinah finds it nice to meet another fan as the bus is picked up by a monster, forcing them to leave and travel the battlefield, helping Batgirl deal with Nocturna. Steph is introduced to Red Canary, who is happy that Dinah remembered her name. Suddenly, a car is thrown at them by Darkseid, but Power Girl catches it. Angered, Darkseid keeps throwing cars, so she's going to go and tell him to stop personally. Dinah asks how long Red Canary has been in action, learning that the woman started after one of Canary's musical shows in Seattle, finding the music transformative, and it made her feel like there was somewhere she belonged. but then Diana died. Canary is confused about how she's alive, and Diana says it's just superhero stuff and there's a very long story. She can assure Red Canary that it is really her and not some zombie doppelganger. More possessed villains try and attack them, so Red Canary readies herself, since now that her hero is treating her like a fellow superhero, she has to really start acting like one. The women take down the possessed villains as Batgirl finds herself impressed with Red Canary, but Diana knows of course she's impressive and can hold her own, since she is a canary after all. Diana teaches Red Canary some pointers as Copperhead tries to surprise Red Canary, but both canaries manage to take her down for good. Red Canary says that she always dreamed of taking down a snake lady with Diana, but her death hit her pretty hard. Red Canary knows that the death motivated her as well, since she was buying a guitar at a music store when someone tried robbing it, so she knocked the man out with the guitar and it felt right to her, so she decided to both learn how to play the guitar and be a hero. Diana can't think of a better legacy, as Red Canary tells her few people get to meet their hero, thinking that she could die happy now, but Black Canary hopes she won't die, since they have bad guys to beat together.